is a concern that I've actually had, Bob. So I'm kind of glad DC brought it up from DC's Bees here. He says, is that part? I guess he asked the question probably when you were talking about the old comb. He says, is that why partly so many nukes can end up with issues? Many beekeepers shed their old comb to the nukes they sell. One concern I have is if I do nukes and if I use that old comb that's, 7, 8 years old, or whatever, is that going to create an issue for the nuke moving forward? Does that create problems if you sell those nukes with the really old comb? I understand if the comb is, within a reasonable time, it's one thing, but the really super old comb, what do you think about that?
Well, I do know of several commercial beekeepers that rather than throw their old comb in the dumpster, which is where it belongs, they make nukes with it and they sell cheap nukes. And you wonder how are they selling nukes for $125? Well, it's because they were going to throw those combs away anyway.
Yeah.
I've seen combs so nasty in nukes that I was uncomfortable touching it. I remember a long time ago, I had a guy in Michigan we made a deal. Guy in Michigan said, I want you to make nukes for me, and I want you to install them into my single-story colonies. I'll bring you the boxes with 6 frames. You make a 3-frame nuke into my equipment. And, we came up with a price, and I agreed. And when I got that stuff, man, it was black. I mean, it was nasty. Okay, well, I made a deal. I'm going to do it. So I made 3-frame nukes into his equipment, and I mated my queen cells and all of that. And my 3 frames were flourishing, but they would not grow as they tried to grow into his stuff. It looked like European foul brood or something. I called him and told him that, and he said, "Oh, give him some terramycin." So I did 2 batches of terramycin. Same problem. And then I called him about the 3rd or 4th time, and he fessed up. And he said, I figured we'd have trouble, but I thought I'd take a chance on it. He said, I just wanted to get those colonies populated, make a crop of honey, and sell them in the fall. He says, that comb is really, really old. He says, I've thrown everything but the kitchen sink in there for treating for mites. He says, I know they're toxic. And I mean, golly, he was trying to populate it and sell it. And that's we like to think that beekeepers are a bunch of angels. Well, it's a pretty good group of people, but you have some not so great folks involved. I've known of many beekeepers that had no problem, trying to pull a fast one on people and selling old black 30-year-old combs. One of them, that's immoral as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, especially when it's intentional like that.
Yeah.
They knew exactly what they were doing.
That happens. A lot of nukes get sold just like that.
There's a big difference between, there's the old saying, everybody knows that money is the root of all evil, but is an extremely necessary tool to do a lot of the things that we are doing while we're on this earth. And while we do, Bob made a great point, why we want to pretend that the beekeeping community by and large is protected from unscrupulous actions or things where integrity is questioned. It's a part of every aspect of life. But I wanted to just quickly throw out there that Bob has hinted at it, but he's too humble to, I think, say it. There is a huge difference between rotating your combs through your operation and using nukes as a way to, in a healthy way, rotate that and to pass on a good quality product to somebody versus dumping your old comb onto somebody else. And I just wanted to bring up the fact that I've been to Bob's place. I've bought singles and bees from Bob and brought them back. And while it wasn't a 1-year-old frame, they were not black. Bob wasn't dumping frames on me on the singles. So when you hear folks talking about their strategy and rotating combs through their system, what Bob is doing is an extremely responsible way to keep his bees healthy. But when he's passing along are also healthy combs too. So there's a difference between rotating your combs using strategy through your system and using nukes to process that versus dumping black death traps out into a nuke.
Yeah, that's really, I think that's key. And that's where I'm at with, if I start selling nukes, of course I have rotated a lot of mine out just because because of certain issues, dead out. So I'm like, this comb is too old. I got to get rid of it. But there is still some pretty old comb out there. But typically the bees, they stay. All my stuff, the bees seem to work. And if they quit working it, that's one thing. One thing that's interesting, I haven't done a lot of cutouts, but some of the ones I have, the very few, if you go into a cutout, if there's been a colony in a wall for years, whether it's, new colonies swarming out, coming in, or just a colony that's sustained itself, you'll notice there is typically a lot of black comb in there, but the bees are not on the black comb. They seem to move, from my experience, they move to the newer comb. Like they're always building new comb each year, and they kind of move it, especially if like in the side of a house where the colony's like, the comb is like 10 feet tall. The bees are at the top, and the old black comb, that's just been what I've seen. It seems like they move on to the newer comb if they can, but if they're stuffed in a box, there's nowhere for them to go to build new comb, then they're kind of stuck.
Right.
And so,
Yeah. Well, 40 years ago, beekeepers considered old black comb an asset. It was tough as nails. You could throw it across the room, load it on a semi truck, run it through the extractor a million miles an hour, no problem,
Yeah.
So just recently we're starting to figure out it's not an asset, it's a liability.